Welcome to the chaos sector. Just a heads up for our audience, we will be going back into the political matrix at some point. But we have dedicated time and effort into investigating this case, so we will see it until the end. The prosecution shuffled their feet about providing the defense with the process of obtaining Kohberger's DNA, and they have not provided the defense with the identities of the 3 additional male DNA samples collected at the crime scene. Bethany Funk apparently has exculpatory evidence. Dylan's whereabouts were not provided by Moscow PD prior to the murders, and the DoorDash driver's identity was never provided in the unredacted PCA, yet the so-called private driver was. The question once again, why would law enforcement conceal the identity of the DoorDash driver in the unredacted PCA, but reveal the private driver as Eric Grower? Remember, it's unredacted. All names were not redacted in this specific PCA. So obviously, the DoorDash driver is someone who law enforcement couldn't reveal in the unredacted PCA because, well, that identity is obviously a suspicious person or even criminal. And on top of that, the so-called delivery would have to be questioned due to that suspicious person. Both so-called drivers are considered suspects to the chaos. We've broken it down to come to that conclusion. The private driver was so-called identified as a man named Eric Grower. Nobody has been able to actually identify this person. With all the digging into social media accounts of various people from Moscow and even Pullman, surely this Grower individual would have been identified. Again, if it were Eric Gower, then who is the person claiming to reside in Pullman, 1,200 feet from Kohberger's doorstep? Now this proves it isn't Eric Gower. Rather, someone used to allude to it being Eric Gower, as many would assume it was a typo in the PCA. Eric Gower resides in Moscow, Idaho, is originally from another town in Idaho, so it is not the person presented as the private driver in the Law and Crime interview. Interesting. Law and Crime, nor any other news network actually reported this claim on any of their YouTube channels. Rather, they nested it in an article on their website. We asked the question, how did this person come in contact with Law and Crime for that interview? Whoever this person was, who we nicknamed Batman, had to have contacted Law and Crime for that interview. And that's the major problem, someone impersonating the private driver. Batman, Eric Grower, Eric Gower, are all the private driver for Kaylee and Maddie that night? Incorrect. It was neither of these individuals. It was the person driving that red Mustang, which was found crashed and abandoned in Moscow soon after the murders. A forensics team was there, inspecting the vehicle, with a strong smell of bleach inside. And Moscow PD came out publicly and stated the vehicle was not related to the murders. 2 vehicles discovered crashed and abandoned, and law enforcement quickly comes out and claims those vehicles were not related to the murders. Eugene PD didn't disclose the year of the white Hyundai Elantra, which matched the description of the suspect's vehicle. What if it was, in fact, a 2011 to 2013 model? Shouldn't the owner of that vehicle be brought in for questioning or tracked, like Kohberger was covertly tracked? Oh, let me guess, that individual is tied to the victim's home. So, let's just sweep that vehicle under the rug. Now, before someone assumes we are claiming this was the private driver, perhaps, but I don't think that was their role. The theories or sub-theories will always shift a bit, so pay attention. I believe that this vehicle was involved in the murders, either it by overseeing the crime, by simply driving around, and then once it was done, they left Moscow. This was the vehicle that was spotted, but it was spotted prior to the alleged Kohberger's arrival. And Kohberger was targeted, but we all know he had a 2015 model. When the FBI changed the year, this was the frame starting to manifest. Moscow PD was searching for a 2011 to 2013 model. Let's just go ahead and assume that was the same year of the vehicle found crashed and abandoned in Oregon, and they decided to clear that vehicle without disclosing the year of it. Somewhere along the way, Kohberger's model had been pointed to by, someone. Because it wasn't the authorities initially, it had to be a, quote, civilian searching for those vehicles. Now, Kohberger's vehicle came up as a 2015 model, right? So why would Moscow PD continue to look into this vehicle when it wasn't the right year? Oh, they made a mistake in identifying a 2011 to 2013 model. But then, how did they conclude it was a 2011 to 2013 model? You see? Keep in mind, neither vehicle of the drivers had been identified. The private driver's vehicle was never identified, nor the DoorDash driver. And once again, the surveillance footage from the neighbor's camera would provide their vehicle's identity. Perhaps it was a white Hyundai Elantra and a red Mustang? I'm done. It's madness.
Never disclosed the year of the white Hyundai Elantra in Oregon. How can you investigate searching for a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra and not only hide the year of that crashed and abandoned white Hyundai Elantra, but also immediately rule it out without any information to do so? Bonkers. Never publicly reported or looked into the warning Jack gave the girls that night. Never reported that the black coat was one of the victims, worn that previous night, which detectives are physically seen picking it up, taking an object out of the coat, and then dumping the coat back on the ground. What the entire... Never provided the name of the DoorDash driver in the unredacted PCA, never provided Dylan's whereabouts prior to the murders, never provided the defense with identities of the 3 male DNA samples. I mean, what the hell is going on here? Is it possible that the so-called informant for the prosecution could be Bonnie? And this is why her identity was never provided in the unredacted PCA? Oh, she's going to testify in saying she saw a white Hyundai Elantra on her way departing after dropping off the crack? It's certainly possible, and it does align with the so-called chain of events. The prosecution is perhaps brainstorming if they should use Bonnie because it's shaky grounds if she were to testify as the DoorDash driver. Mind you, Dylan never claimed to. Wait a minute, can't believe we never mentioned this. Dylan never claimed to hear or acknowledge Xana in regards to her DoorDash delivery. She claimed to hear what she thought was Kaylee upstairs playing with her dog, hearing voices, hearing crying, but never acknowledged any physical activity of the DoorDash delivery, such as hearing the sliding doors open, hearing the sliding doors close, hearing a conversation, perhaps telling Ethan she got the food. Surely there would be some type of interaction before and after the delivery where the housemates would be up awaiting food. Mind you, it was never confirmed that Ethan was asleep, and just common sense tells us that he was awake, even in the scenario of her affidavit. Wouldn't she include that in her so-called accounts of physical activity in the home? Surely the DoorDash driver was met at the door, which is near Dylan's bedroom, and Dylan would have been awake during this time. Now there is conflicting views on the Jack and the crack bag discovered on the kitchen counter. But let's say it was from that night. This would mean the second floor was active. Someone was in the kitchen. Yet, Dylan never claimed to acknowledge her physical activity in the kitchen. Surely there would be noises heard, walking around in the kitchen, water running in the sink, the refrigerator door opening and closing, etc. No accounts of hearing anything in association to her DoorDash delivery.
And going back to the DoorDash driver, there is no specific time of that delivery, for obvious reasons. If there was a specific time of that delivery, with an actual receipt showing the time, we could pinpoint that time of delivery with Dylan's so-called accounts of activity in the home, such as voices heard. They approximated the time with that delivery, being around 4 a.m. No, we needed the exact time it was delivered. They provided an exact time of Kaylee and Maddie arriving back home at 1:56 a.m. They even provided their phone calls to Jack in specific times. Yet with Xana's DoorDash delivery, they approximated the time along with the TikTok activity. They couldn't provide the specific time of the delivery because it would conflict with Dylan's accounts during the 4 a.m. time frame, and also the time the alleged Koberger entered the home. Furthermore, they definitely couldn't provide the specific time if they didn't identify the actual person who so-called delivered the damn order. So it all points towards the DoorDasher being a suspect.
Another key point. To prove she never ordered that crap and was already deceased by that time frame. She couldn't acknowledge this so-called activity because in that scenario, there would obviously be activity on that second floor from Ethan and Xana, and that changes the narrative of Kaylee and Maddie being murdered first. Remember, Dylan claims to be awakened by what she assumed was Kaylee upstairs playing with Murphy, right? Well, this would be approximately 4 a.m., right? But isn't Xana also awake and waiting for her DoorDash delivery? No mention of hearing any of this activity. It was after this delivery where Dylan claims to hear crying coming from her bedroom. So she heard crying, but never heard any physical activity from the kitchen, such as the sliding doors opening and closing, laughing or playing around, any type of communication between the couple. Yeah, okay. Anywho, we're going in circles, but just magnifying the frame the more we circle. Let's call it here. Bonnie is the informant, but they're playing with fire. Because she could be interrogated by the defense, and she would definitely slip up. For that matter, whoever the informant is, will slip up. Dylan's accounts are literally the trail to the truth, Bethany as well. They have to testify, It's the only way to carry out the trial, as they were the surviving housemates. Remember, it is Dylan's accounts that describe Koberger, a man in all black with a mask covering his lower face, bushy eyebrows, and about 5'10". Although Koberger is a bit taller, that can be subjective based on that setting, but nevertheless she is a witness who will have to testify in court about what she witnessed. You can't hide her in the background. Dylan was an actual eyewitness that night, observing the alleged Koberger, the killer, walking past her. There's no way around summoning her to testify in court, and that will be another aspect of the truth being revealed. This is another headache for the prosecution. And trust me, they know very well the problem her testimony would create. Keep in mind, the mainstream media are the ones that actually threw Dylan under the bus, if you think about it. In her affidavit, it claims she locked herself in her bedroom and went to sleep, right? But the mainstream media didn't report this. They claimed that Dylan waited 8 hours before calling 911. Why are they presenting the setting where Dylan was awake the entire time when it states she actually went to sleep? Oh yeah, because her affidavit didn't make a lick of sense and everyone had already exposed it. So they executed, wait for it, damage control. Now, if we were to dig deeper into that setting the mainstream media depicted, then for one, there is an obstruction of justice charge. But more importantly, Dylan would have been awake the entire time the attacks and the murders took place. But did the mainstream media dig deeper into that setting? Of course not. Yet, you're presenting a setting where Dylan is awake and aware and just sat in the house with deceased housemates and didn't do anything about it. Isn't she considered a suspect at that point? Nope, not to the mainstream media. Through their magic pixie dust sprinkled over their viewers, they can somehow criticize Dylan for not calling 911 until 8 hours had passed, yet at the same damn time, don't raise suspicions about Dylan's potential involvement in the murders. I mean, what else can you conclude in that setting? She's literally sitting in a house with 4 deceased housemates and says, well, I'll just wait around for about, I don't fucking know, 8 hours before I do anything about it. Mind you, the mainstream media never retracted that belief about the setting in the home, so how does Dylan just fade off into the shadows without being ruled a suspect? All of this is rhetorical, by the way, without an actual motive for the alleged Koberger who stayed in the neighboring state Pullman, Washington. This leaves an inner circle within Moscow, Idaho. No evidence that Koberger knew any of those housemates, not even evidence that he was associated with anyone who knew those housemates. And do you know where the mainstream media got the so-called digital evidence from? Oh, you're going to love this one. They got that claim from these screenshots. Yeah, great work in reporting. Never checked to see if it was authentic. Just saw it. Oh, it has to be authentic, because there's Koberger's photo. It has to be his profile. And sure enough, he followed Kaylee and Maddie. Bingo. There's the evidence. There's the motive. It didn't matter that it was considered a claim from a quote source. They had examined the same crap the source examined and were convinced it was evidence. If Koberger stalked those housemates, there would have been evidence somewhere in his home, on his laptop, on his cell phone. Oh, they found Maddie's ID card in his glove compartment. Oh, no, wait. They reported that investigators discovered ID cards related to the Idaho murders, yet they never identified those individuals? Oh, okay, just report he had fucking IDs of college students related to the Idaho murders, and don't reveal their names. Oh, okay, yeah. Keep it a secret then. Just like everything else, they never found any IDs. Oh, they also found hair strands at his home? Did the result come back of whose hair strand it was? What about the claim they discovered what appeared to be dog hair? Was it Murphy? Did he wrestle with Murphy as he tried to protect Kaylee? Or did he just, pet Murphy on his way out? That's something a sicko would do, Isn't that right, old hag Grace? You depicted the defendant that way, without any evidence. The true definition of batshit crazy. And Ashley Banfield was the passive-aggressive version of that witch, which actually makes her a bit more dangerous. Old hag is upfront with her madness, but individuals like Banfield lull the viewers to sleep in thinking she's being genuine. All the while, she did the exact same thing to Koberger's image. All garbage fuckery. We exposed that crap in the first series. The mainstream media threw Dylan under the bus early in the reports of the case and then threw her even deeper under that bus by claiming she was texting with Bethany about the attacks and murders. So the truth is coming out no matter how they tried to hide it. Once again, for those murders to be accomplished in the manner they were, somebody had to be an accomplice from the inside. We obtained this evidence by the mainstream media about Dylan, and then later during trial, where the same mainstream media claimed Dylan was texting Bethany during the attacks. But this time, they had to pair Bethany with Dylan because we all know that Dylan's associations with certain people leads directly to the motive behind the murders. Bethany being included somewhat offsets Dylan's crimes. They are trapped in a corner with Dylan's affidavit, causing so many suspicions about that night. And this is where the prosecution will fall apart. Too many suspicious elements surrounding everyone else when the person charged for the murders hasn't been proven to have a connection to any of those housemates. No motive. But within Moscow, Idaho, specifically in that college circle, there are several motives that will just keep coming to the forefront. It ends with those who were involved. You can't keep the truth from coming out.
What about this for context? Kohberger's whereabouts were given in all reports, including a path and even alleged surveillance footage prior to the murders. Yet Dylan's whereabouts were never provided prior to the murders. We need people to really grasp this problem. Dylan's whereabouts not being provided in the police report indicates those whereabouts are obviously a link to the murders. Otherwise, Moscow PD would have included her whereabouts in the police report, stating, quote, Dylan was out on the town is not providing an actual location that can be verified, or better yet, giving her a legitimate alibi. Your job is to establish this information and report it to the public. It doesn't matter if you believe she is not capable of committing the massacre or involved. It is your duty as law enforcement to verify where Dylan was and report it to the people. Yet they never did. Moscow PD gave a vague alibi, basically. Chief Fry, can you explain where Dylan Mortensen was prior to the murders? Oh, she was over there somewhere. Can you elaborate on where over there somewhere was located? Sure, she was over there somewhere around 10 p.m. Sir, that didn't answer my question. Is there something you're trying to hide about Dylan's whereabouts? Okay, we're no longer taking questions. The press conference is over, and that only made Dylan appear to be more suspicious. Some have speculated it is in fact Bonnie and Clyde who are the informants. We all know that drug dealers are usually informants, so it's possible. But like mentioned, it would not work out for the prosecution, even if Bonnie claimed to spot a white Hyundai Elantra as she left the home. In regards to the interview with the DoorDasher, apparently law enforcement didn't obtain any information about the small window between their arrival and the alleged Kohberger's arrival. We went over this, but again, if Kohberger arrives in that neighborhood approximately around 3:30 a.m. and is creeping around back and forth, surely the DoorDash driver would have spotted this white Hyundai Elantra at some point, either coming back to the neighborhood or leaving. Yet the DoorDash driver had no information about spotting a white Hyundai Elantra in the interview. Furthermore, there wasn't much to the accounts of the DoorDash driver, yet would have physically approached the house and interacted with one of the victims. Well, there's a lot going on behind closed doors, my friends. In other words, that DoorDash driver is known by Moscow PD because they work together. Yes, Bonnie was the DoorDash driver. She is a drug pusher in town with Clyde. And we all know that law enforcement has a few, if not several, badges on the payroll of the drug organization. It's nothing new. It happens all the time in every state, city, and across the world. So their informant is actually their, quote, business associate. We can't confirm, of course, that these two are the informants, but that DoorDash driver is clearly a suspect, due to them not being identified in the unredacted PCA. The delivery was to simply make sure everything went according as planned, a reason to enter the home and go over the, quote, alibi with Dylan. Yep, we have come to that conclusion. Then later that morning, guess who returns back to the home? That's right, Bonnie and Clyde. And we also came to the conclusion that Dylan was there by herself at that point, as Bethany had left, or even escaped. The prosecution is dreading the potential of Bethany testifying for the defense. That would be a real-life nightmare in that courtroom. We will see what happens. Oh, and by the way, Kohberger's alibi apparently has him in Pullman, meaning he was never in Moscow that night. Let's find out if there is actual proof of this alibi. If this can be physically proven, it would expose the claims his vehicle was spotted in the neighborhood by surveillance. No wonder the Linda Lane surveillance didn't come out until 8 months later. Should have never released it, but they were so eager to convince the public Kohberger was there. The chaos exposed it. Now what are they going to do with it? This is the chaos sector.